We are in Pavilion of Turkey, talking about the free space as film space in the Vardiya number 3. We are going to meet with our first online critic, with Ayşe Şentürer. I'm very glad that she's here. She's professor of architectural design at Istanbul Technical University, Faculty of Architecture, and she's lecturing there since 1985. She researched and taught at several other universities like University of Cincinnati, Harvard University, AA, or Chinese University of Hong Kong, and several other important institutions. She authored and co-edited several books about aesthetic phenomenon, about architectural education. And she currently teaches undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate programs, writes about architectural design, representation and theory, urban design, aesthetics and design education. She is my advisor for my PhD on architectural design in Istanbul Technical University, and we are very excited about her contributions to the third shift. Welcome and thank you, Ayşe Hocam. I'm leaving the speech to you now.
And I'm so glad to be a part of your workshop. And hello, everybody. And it seems it is really going to be excited. We are somehow used to giving lectures or talking in studio, but this is somehow different, and I'm excited. That's why. But I'm really very glad to be part of the workshop in Vardiya and in your team. If you want, I can start the presentation since the time is so limited. What I'm going to do actually in these 30 minutes, I would like to mention our studio approach, which is, I guess, going to give some insights for you for the workshop. And then while I'm speaking on our approach, I'll show some examples from the studio. In that time, I'm not going to speak on that examples, but after finishing my introduction to our studio, I'll try to speak on several of the projects somehow by one by. Then I hope we will have some time to talk and have a discussion. And it's interesting when I see the title "Film Space as a Free Space." I said that's very true. Film space is a free space that we are also applying in our studio. And it is also interesting. Last term in our diploma project, we announced the theme as accommodating architecture and innovation in architecture, accommodation and public space. Actually, we were looking for a kind of program, kind of spatial configurations or atmosphere that open a space for working on architecture, for talking on architecture, and producing and experiencing architecture. Last term, we had quite interesting discussion on that through the juries. Now I'm going to have a similar kind of speech here. Now I would like to share our one of the draft book. It is going to be published, but the projects in this book, which are about trans studio, and say something about our studio approach. Now you will see it. And yes, in the studio, in the almost all architectural and urban design studios, we are dealing with cities, especially metropolises such as Istanbul, and trying to understand the cities and then make some reflection and projections from the cities. While we are working that, and I come to the point that the critical axis, critical sections are the more provocative ones and more creative ones to work on the cities. Then we started to work on through the critical and cultural approach, and underlining how important is questioning the existing situations and understand not the only visible ones, but the invisible ones in terms of life space interactions. And then the question arises how we can really understand and present and reflect that conditions. And we have the set of representation techniques coming from architectural background. And then I started to think about the potentials of cinematography, especially montage, bring different kind of things together in from two perspective actually, to understand and represent, then to design. Then we start to apply layered montage techniques we arrow from cinematography. Then I call this kind of approach architectural and cinematographic representations, and briefly are archicine sections. That was the one thing to understand and to design the cities. And but what gives us that approach to have a deeper kind of way of looking to cities, to life and space, time and space interactions, and also through the cinematography, we were somehow managing to see the potentials of movement in relation to time and in relation to space, the potentials of perception. And poetics always was part of it. Poetics is related to perception and movement. Then it was quite closely related to cinematography and cinematographic approach. That's why I apply that approach in our studio. It was very insightful, very provocative, and very creative actually. Then I came to the topic of somehow future visions. I mean, we were dealing with the existing conditions, the critical, the crisis conditions of cities, and we were applying to these cinematography and architectural conventions, especially architectural sections, sectional drawings. Sectional drawings has very similar actually potentials what montage in cinematography has. That's why I brought them together and to cut and bring together some qualities or properties of cities and life and space, etc. And but the feature vision, the more emphasis on feature vision and more emphasis on feature was underlining the potentials of imaginations. Actually, when you start to talk about the cinematography in architectural design, which means you are dealing with images. At the beginning, I was interested in more making short films, documentaries, but after that, I thought how we can put them together in a two-dimensional drawings, but acting as multi-dimensional presentations, because that's another potential in the moving images. The images is moving, but in a two-dimensional drawings, you are bringing them together. It is two-dimensional, but acting as not only third but fourth dimensional, and you can feel the space, time, and movement. And that is the one thing that borrowing something also from the idea of future visions. We are working with images, we are thinking, logic, projecting the existing conditions to the future, which makes somehow more freer us to the, let's say, normal kind of attitudes. Because you are applying in that time to your imaginative capacities, then you are using the existing conditions plus imaginative potentials of thinking through the images. And this was other keyword of our studio, that dealing with the borderlines of city, to look at lines through the critical cultural approach, to represent and design, apply architecture and cinematography, then for the projections and to underline, to freeing the people and the ideas, and project them into the future, but then come back to today again. We never thought that we are designing something for example, for 2050s or 2100. We are designing for today, but projecting our ideas to the future somehow to free ourselves. And to do it, we are applying images, we are thinking through the images, which are including the existing conditions and also the imaginative ideas. For example, now what you are seeing, again, a project from our trans studio, the, the, the images at the upper right corner of the page, for example, one of the very early images of this project. After making a deeper research on the place, and working our key scene sections, and when he applied his imaginative ideas, he had such an image. Then developed the project through that images to reach that images. Actually, I research, and I believe I may say that bringing these both sides are very creative, and also you are not using your critical attitudes, your critical way of looking. Perhaps I can give some more time for this example. This project, it was in Büyükada, and Hakan was interested in so much cinematography. He collected all the movies shot in the island, and made a really very deeper research. He watched all the movies. Then he went to the real site of the movies. Then made another research, and to see the existing spatial layouts of that buildings, which were used for the movies. Then made a comparison in between filmic space and the real space. That was another interesting way of approach. Then he made a proposal. It was so interesting, actually, how cinematography is changing the existing conditions and giving another kind of spatial configuration. I gave this example. Perhaps it could be helpful for thinking about cinematography and architecture. And again, for example, in this project, this image is one of the very early images. Again, after making a deeper research on the site and on the theme, then she placed her imaginative ideas on the real conditions of the place, and developed the program and project, etc. And now I can summarize our studio approach like that. Studio aims to find out and design new architectural, which means temporal, spatial, programmatic interventions by looking at realities of life and cities through critical attitudes and creative imaginations. And for this purpose, we work on the critical sections, problematic and promising borderlines of a metropolis. And we are work with architectural cinematographic sections, enabling us cultural and structural dechiffres and designs rising from these lines of a metropolis. And we and thinking on future visions of cities and life and architecture, and then coming back to today's conditions and thinking on architecture again is the other part of the studio, and gives us the opportunity to launch today's issues into the imaginative features, which opens up optimistic scenarios. I'm calling them as optimistic criticism or critical optimism, and besides, poetics of architecture and movement is among the researches of studio, and which is very much related to cinematographic approach to see the potentials of course movement and body perception. And writing a manifesto and working with images is the other emphasis of the studio, gives an opportunity for everybody, not the students at the studio. This is a kind of general approach to express their ideas, even even with a very anger words. And there are some other examples, but I'll be very quick on that. This is from our Future Visions New York studio. You can follow the imaginative character and the critical character of the attitudes, how imaginations are coming together with the existing conditions of city. And there are just a few example from this studio. Now, for example, I'll show one example. Again, it's from the Future Visions New York City studio. For example, here you will see several frames. This project, actually all the project, and developed and designed, and frame by frame even. And as you see, she's imagining and then trying to design what she's imagining in here. One of the, again, examples going on. We had a quite motivated studios and really helping us to to develop our insights. And perhaps I can show some other examples from our Future Visions Istanbul studio. And for example, this is one of the latest image, and at the end of the process, let's say, we are starting with the images and get from the critical cultural approach, then put on these images on our imaginations. Then after developing a project, actually it is not difficult to say before and after. Those are parallel processes. And again, come back to the real conditions and put the real conditions this time on top of it, on top of our imaginative projections, let's say. This is such kind of example. I can show some others. For example, this is another project, and Sardar was looking for the movement of birds, and he was interested in ecology of the city, and the studio again was dealing this time Future Visions Istanbul. And after following the routes of the birds, then make a decision where he is going to work, and made some images again. And for example, this one again was the one of the early images, and project developed through that images. And I can show just a few more. This is from our new museum studio. Again, we were dealing with Future Vision Istanbul. I especially opened that page that's showing creating images of the projects, but they are not separated from the other things, and you can see the program of the project and how it is really related with the images, and in what time what is going to be is written here, and their images is here. We were developing in such a way that we really applying the power of architectural conventions, but especially sectional drawings, and the power of montage that we are all borrowed from cinematography. As a last images, perhaps I can show just 2-3 more. I have heard that one of our students are working with you, Nida Ekenel. This is her early images. Again, we apply the same approach. Perhaps after that she can give you a wider presentation about her project. But what I mean with images, something like this: existing conditions plus your imaginations, but those are really deeply researches, and too many research and experimentation. Then you can develop your project. This is from a Future Vision Moscow studio, which was last spring term. Again, this might be an example, bringing the existing condition and the imaginative ones together, but with its all details. And this was very interesting one. For example, this is coming from the very early stages of the process, and this dechiffres from the existing city, from the daily life of Muscovitz, and then it was developed in relation to the Stizin's attitude, but by applying the imaginative images of the herself. Ekim was working on that project. This is how it is programmed, just by applying the Muscovitz ideas and the designer's own ideas. I may say that all the project developed from this very first image. Now I guess I'm coming back to the main screen, and if you have some questions, I would like to try to answer.
Thank you very much. I think this was a very meaningful session. And I think what you're doing in your studio is very, similar in some way, but also it has some contrasts with what we are doing here. I think you're like kind of exploring architecture with cinematographic tools, and you're working with image. You're working architecture through images, and what we're doing here is to explore architecture, to explore the architecture of a chase scene. And I think we will be trying to draw and maybe design the image of a chase scene. And I think it's very useful for us to see the examples of products of your studio. Is there anyone who would like to ask to her? I mean, yes.
Thank you, Ayşe hocam. I wanted to say maybe not more like a question, but add, and maybe if you want to answer it, we went to the Moscow, Russian pavilion as well, and saw what was happening there, and they were working with the train station as a topic, and also like making some models on future as well, such a way that you couldn't see the future because it was layered above you. In this case, since we were working with future, I mean, we discuss a lot about being predictive and imaginative. Maybe you can make some comments on how we can turn being imaginative or predictive in our workshop in Biennale here.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a very good question. And yeah, we had to make discussion on that, being a predictive and being an imaginative. What I can say, basically, usually our attitude, most of the designer, perhaps all of the designer, what we are looking what we are having in our hands. It is very important to picture somehow what we are having in our hands. And now we are having really very dark tables in front of us if we look at the existing conditions from several points of view, ecologically, politically, economically, etc. But when we project this information or that what we are having in our hands, usually we could have really dark scenarios, dark feature scenarios. That's why that is one thing, and almost everybody is doing it. But we can make some changes, which usually that idea is given to the field of art, and to change something, to change the ideas, especially not the thing perhaps. And what we are applying through the imaginations and being imaginative is and somehow we are picturing what we would like to have instead of this. Then how we can reach to the image that we are imagining, which will be better than today. And being an imaginative needs really to apply our all potential imaginative attitudes, including every kind of representation, experimentations, also being critical. Because if you are not asking and if you are not criticizing, but not in a negative way, and to find out how we can really run away from that condition, and giving lots of clues us to think about. If we are not having such kind of attitude, we are not even thinking on that, and we are not imagining. That's why we prefer to be at the imaginative side, not the predictive side of the design approach. And when you look at the literature also, you can see lots of manifesto. Most of them are really predictive, not very much imaginative, and there are imaginative ones too. I may say, and making experimentation and applying different kind of tools together is going to help you. And also, I watch the some of the workshop products, and it is going to be so interesting. I was excited too. Now you are working up to now separately. You had the same title, perhaps a kind of description that you can follow, but now you are at the edge of really being very creative because you are going to apply the moment, not the moment images, but the time images, because all you have different kind of images, and these images coming from the background of moment images, you are following natural movements with your cameras, as I see. But now you are going to bring them together and try to be really experimental to bring them together, I may say.
Thank you. So thank you very much. I think we are going to, we are also excited about our next online meeting, Gül Erk Kaçmaz. So, I mean, I think you're in Bodrum, yes?
Yes,
That's a very nice view, so.
Yeah, I didn't do anything. I was partly holiday, but not. I worked for you.
Okay, have a nice holiday. Bye. Thank you.
For the invitation. Have a good work. Thank you. Bye bye.